State fermo! Calma, come li cercano?
Che cazzo devi?
The movie begins by showing a beautiful view of the city of Rome, but the beauty is immediately broken when a man named Enzo is chased by the police, where he has just stolen a luxury watch that he plans to sell to make a living. In his escape, Enzo tried to hide in a crane boat that transports garbage that is usually used to clean the river. He hoped the police would give up and leave, but apparently they actually entered the ship. With no other choice, Enzo dived into the river to avoid arrest, and the police, who could not find any trace of Enzo, finally left. When the situation was deemed safe, Enzo tried to rise to the surface, but unfortunately he slipped and fell into a drum tank containing radioactive waste under the river. Although he managed to return to his apartment, Enzo experienced a high fever, several vomiting, and severe coughing, which he did not realize his body had been contaminated with a dangerous black substance. The next day, Enzo's body condition improved surprisingly. He then looked for Sergio, his neighbor, who lived on the same floor, to sell the previously stolen watches. But Sergio was not at home, so Enzo decided to look for Sergio at his workplace. Sergio himself is a member of a criminal gang led by a ruthless man named Fabio, who does not hesitate to kill his men if they make mistakes, and among the members, Sergio is known as the most loyal to Fabio. That morning, Fabio was deliberating who among them would be brave enough to make a drug deal from another dealer at the airport, and because no one was willing to make the transaction, Sergio finally intervened himself. After the negotiations were over, Sergio met Enzo to buy the stolen watch for 100 euros, and Sergio, who realized that Enzo was a talented thief, then invited him to the drug retrieval mission that Fabio had previously ordered. And because there was no reason to refuse, Enzo finally agreed to carry out the mission. They then took some tools first at Sergio's house, and there Enzo met Alessia, who seemed very enthusiastic about talking about a Japanese cartoon called Steel Jig. At first, Enzo thought it was strange, but over time he realized that Alessia had a mental disorder. On the way to the airport, Sergio explains that Alessia has suffered trauma since her mother died. It also makes her often equate the real world with the world of her favorite anime and consider the people around her as characters in the anime. 2 hours later, they are at the airport to make a quick drug deal, but the situation changes when one of them overdoses and asks to be sent to the hospital. But instead of helping, Sergio takes him to an abandoned building and then continues the transaction first by going up to the top floor. Unfortunately, the man who overdosed earlier died on the spot, and it sparked the anger of his friend, who without thinking immediately shot Sergio, while Enzo, who only watched, was also shot and fell from the top floor. Miraculously, he only fainted briefly and regained consciousness and good health, then returned to the apartment while holding a gunshot wound in his shoulder. Upon arriving home, Enzo was greeted by Alessia, who was still waiting for her father to come home, but Enzo couldn't tell her what happened and chose to go straight to his room. He then checked his gunshot wound and strangely didn't feel any pain. And when he wanted to calm down by watching a video, he was distracted by Alessia's commotion at his door. Annoyed, Enzo went to the metal door of his room, but it unexpectedly broke, and that's when Enzo realized that he now had extraordinary powers. He then experimented with moving the fridge, which now felt light, bending iron bars, and finally came up with the idea to break into a bank machine. By wearing a hoodie and a face cover, Enzo stole an ATM machine and took it home easily thanks to his powers. The action was recorded by surveillance cameras and immediately became a trending topic that day. People also dubbed him a supervillain, and in the end that night, Enzo could enjoy a good life that he had never felt. The next day, Enzo was surprised to find that his gunshot wounds had all disappeared, as if nothing had happened. When he left the apartment, Enzo saw Alessia being surrounded by Fabio's gang, who were looking for Sergio because he had not returned with the drug money. Fabio himself is distressed because he has to pay Nuncia, the leader of the rival gang, because the drugs he ordered haven't arrived yet. Alessia, who was asked about her father, answered that her father might have been kidnapped by the Fire King, an evil character from the Steel Jig anime. That answer also made Fabio upset because he felt played, and he even threatened to kill Alessia. Fortunately, before something bad happened, Enzo came through the window wearing a hoodie and mask, then beat Fabio's men until they retreated. After the fight, Enzo took Alessia to his apartment to avoid Fabio's threats. And when he got there, Enzo immediately connected his almost broken toe with duct tape, hoping to recover like his gunshot wound yesterday. Alessia suddenly laughed when she saw Enzo's apartment full of wet money because of the security ink from the ATM machine. She then advised Enzo to use his strength for good instead of stealing, because according to Alessia, Enzo should use his strength to help others, for example, saving Alessia's father from kidnapping, which immediately heard that made Enzo feel guilty because the fact that Alessia's father had died after being shot yesterday. That night, Enzo, who could not sleep, opened Sergio's box and found a suspicious map suspected of containing Fabio's group plan. The next day, Enzo decided to leave Alessia, where she had been left as a child by her father, so as not to disturb him. Although she refused, Alessia finally agreed to stay after Enzo promised to buy her a princess dress and would pick her up in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Fabio and his men are confused to find out the identity of the man in the hoodie who beat them yesterday, and also the whereabouts of Sergio, who is still unclear until now. They are also increasingly depressed because Nunzia's gang has begun to collect drug payments, and Fabio, who has a big prestige, is reluctant to go into debt even though it has been suggested by his subordinate named Recca. The problem then became more complicated when Nunzia's men came with the news that Sergio had been found dead, and they still demanded full payment because the goods had already been delivered. On the other hand, Enzo was still stealing, but later that night when he wanted to watch his favorite video, he found an anime tape and unexpectedly began to like the show. Meanwhile, in a state of urgency, Fabio finally decided to rob a car carrying money according to the old plan he had compiled with the late Sergio. He estimated that the car was carrying 200,000 euros, and with his men, Fabio was on standby at the corner of the road, complete with his weapon. But unfortunately, before he could act, someone stopped the car first and took the money, which turned out to be the culprit, Enzo the supervillain. Enzo used the proceeds of his robbery to buy various new equipment, including a giant home theater projector to install in his apartment. He also bought a complete DVD of the Steel Jig anime series because he was unknowingly addicted to the anime, like Alessia, but before he could watch it, his apartment was visited by the police. Enzo panicked, but it turned out that the policeman was just escorting Alessia, who was previously found wandering. The policeman also reminded Enzo to take care of Alessia, considering her weak mental condition. Alicia seems happy to be back in her apartment, and despite her mental illness, she begins to admire Enzo, who is considered a hero, while Enzo also begins to respect Alessia, and they watch a movie together. However, the watching together triggers traumatic memories in Alessia, where she turns out to have been abused by someone in the past, which adds to the wounds after losing her mother. Enzo tries to calm her down and understand the hurt.
Mi fa male! Mi andare!
The next day, Enzo no longer left Alessia in a special needs care center, but until now, Alessia still thinks her father is still in the Hell Cave in the Steel Jig anime. Enzo then took her to the playground cave, but unfortunately, the place was full of memories with her father during her childhood, which made her sad again. Meanwhile, Recca, one of Fabio's members, began to be impatient with Fabio's leadership. He began to insist that Fabio borrow money to pay debts to Nunzia, but the experts listened to his suggestions. Recca was instead killed by Fabio with his pet stray dog. On the other hand, Enzo now invites Alessia to go to the mall to forget her sadness. Finally, Alessia, who previously panicked easily, can now laugh freely and even start telling long stories about Steel Jig without making Enzo uncomfortable. When they passed by a clothing store, Enzo bought a dress for Alessia according to his previous promise, and that moment strengthened the bond between them. Enzo, who was alone, felt that his life mattered, while Alessia found the protector she had always needed. However, their happiness did not last long, because Alessia again asked Enzo to save her father. This upset Enzo so much that he unknowingly said that Sergio had died. The remark also made Alessia angry and chose to take the tram alone, while Enzo immediately followed her, even stopped the tram with his bare hands just to apologize without thinking about his identity that could be revealed. Because of his actions recorded by residents, Enzo was suspected of being a super criminal who often robbed ATM machines. Elsewhere, due to necessity, Fabio finally borrowed money from a transvestite named Marcello, according to Reca's previous plan. But before getting the money, suddenly Nunzia and his men came to attack. Fabio was almost burned alive, but fortunately it turned out that Nunzia was just laughing at him and joking. But Marcello instead took it seriously and immediately shot at them, which made 3 of Nunzia's members dead. And this, of course, made Fabio angry and immediately killed Marcello. At the same time, Enzo finally brings Alessia to the hospital to see Sergio's body, and after reminiscing about all the memories with her father, Alessia finally let go of her father. Meanwhile, Fabio, who was frightened because he had killed a gangster as big as Nunzia, finally went home. And when he arrived at the headquarters, he was shocked to see that all his members were dead except Tazi. Fabio then began to investigate the identity of the supervillain, and from the internet he found footage of the man who stopped the tram earlier and finally realized that the person was Enzo. Realizing that he was starting to be hunted because of his previous actions, Enzo invited Alessia to escape from the apartment to a safer place, but Fabio and Tazi had secretly followed them. Enzo and Alessia then stayed at a hotel, and when they were about to rest, Enzo suddenly got a call from Fabio, who apparently knew their hiding place. Enzo was shot with a tranquilizer, and he was finally helpless while Tazi kidnapped Alessia and kept her in the car. When Enzo woke up, he found that his body had been bound by duct tape, and afterward Fabio began to interrogate him about the superpowers that Enzo had, because he also wanted that power and had a crazy plan to blow up the station with a big bomb. Although initially silent, Enzo was finally forced to divulge his secret for the sake of the safety of Alessia, who was held by Tezzi. Enzo was then forced to take Fabio to the riverbank, where he used to get his superpowers, and afterward he asked Fabio to free Alessia, but Fabio flatly refuses. Meanwhile, Alessia, who is held by Tazi, tries to trick him, and she pretends to want to go to the toilet so she can untie her hands. In a state of urgency, Enzo realizes that their fate is now in Fabio's hands, but unexpectedly, Nunzia's gang suddenly appears and immediately shoots Fabio. At the same time, Alessia ran to Enzo, but unfortunately, she was shot in the chaos. Enzo was devastated by what happened to Alessia. He didn't know what conflict happened between Nunzia and Fabio, but now Alessia was the victim. While holding back tears, Enzo apologized to Alessia and hoped that Alessia could survive to get treatment. But in her last breath, Alessia only advised Enzo to use his strength to help people. After that, Alessia breathed her last, leaving Enzo alone again in the world. It turns out that Fabio is not dead after being shot earlier, and he managed to survive the river after falling because he also drank radioactive waste that made his body as strong as Enzo. Now Fabio is preparing to take revenge, and he came to Nunzia's headquarters and slaughtered them very cruelly. On the other hand, Enzo, who was still grieving, felt lost the spirit to live, but a sudden event changed everything after he witnessed a car accident, where 2 policemen managed to save a woman, but a small child was still trapped in the car. Without hesitation, Enzo stepped in and saved the child using his powers. His heroic actions made the mother say thank you, and that's when Enzo realized that helping others could make his heart feel very happy. A few moments later, Enzo saw the news on television about the trending topic video of Fabio slaughtering Nunzia's gang alone. This time, Fabio announced that he would carry out acts of terror in crowded places using bombs because Fabio wanted the world to see him as the most dangerous terrorist. Remembering Fabio's words about the stadium, Enzo immediately headed to the stadium in the city without hesitation. In the area outside the stadium, Enzo finally confronted Fabio and tried to stop him. But now Fabio has also become a superhuman who makes the fight between them balanced. In the chaos, Fabio had activated a bomb that made Enzo panic, and without thinking, Enzo immediately took the bomb away from the stadium using a car. In the midst of an increasingly tense situation, Enzo finally jumped off the bridge with Fabio and the bomb, which dropped them into the river. The heroic action succeeded in stopping the terror, even made Fabio's head crushed and died on the spot. After that incident, Enzo was no longer known as a criminal because he was now recognized as a superhero who saved the citizens of the city from a major threat. According to Alessia's message, Enzo now uses his powers to help others who need help. And in memory of Alessia, he also wears a knit mask made by Alessia as a symbol of his new identity as a superhero of Rome. And the movie ends.